arte en la época colonial. La práctica artística de Khadija consiste en el montaje de palabras e imágenes en películas e instalaciones que dan voz a historias alternativas mediante textos y performance. Sus áreas de especialización en investigación artística son el arte conceptual y el postcolonialismo, la migración y las políticas fronterizas, la vigilancia, las historias globales del arte y la ciencia del siglo XIX y contemporánea, los materiales y la conservación, las culturas de exhibición en museos, la historia de la arquitectura, la etnografía sensorial y la recolección de cultura material, la ecología, las ontologías no europeas, la clasificación y la taxonomía. Crea videos y escribe guiones para contar historias y generar intervenciones en situaciones donde la deslocación y el conflicto ponen al descubierto las relaciones históricas entre humanos y objetos. Pues muchas gracias y podemos comenzar con tu presentación, Khadija.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be there with you, if only digitally. And thank you so much for the invitation and also for the translation. So I am going to speak to you today about a gift and a problem also, which is a very kind of long and ongoing history. And that is the location here from which I'm speaking, actually, which is Vienna, the capital of Austria, and the National Museum that you see the facade of in this first slide. And I'll be unwrapping quite literally and also theoretically that package, and we'll return to that later on. Some of the main themes of this research project that is, as Professor Flores said, about the repatriation of national patrimony, something that Mexico is famously leading, I would say, a very strong position internationally. And my project is really about comparing different gestures of return of cultural property, looking at that within the so-called process of decolonization, as you see here, often where politics and scientific conservation are working together, but also providing different ethical frameworks between source communities, on one hand, indigenous communities, and on the other, laws, property laws, notions of human rights, which are shifting now that, for example, ancestors and items in museums are seen to have their rights of their own. This really changes the way we're dealing with museums, and oral histories becoming more important, performances becoming more important. And so I'm really studying how museology is changing to relate to indigenous ontologies, to deal with intangible culture and the affects, and also the methods that we as researchers use. So these are just broadly at the start of the project, when I began this many years ago, what I was hoping to cover. And I'm just going to zoom into one particular case, which was already introduced. There's a German translation. I'm very sorry, there's not a Spanish translation yet for this book, but you read, I think, some of the English, and it's open access, so you can access it online. You can also access a lot more material about the other case studies, which, as it was said, is come from West Africa, Southern Africa, the Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, and are led by a whole collective team that is working on these projects. And we're in an ongoing kind of publication process, also online. It began in a sense, I guess there was a watershed moment, one could say, when President of France, Macron, promised a widespread repatriation to sub-Saharan Africa of looted colonial materials that were important, or are important and as Bénédicte Savoy and the economist Felwine Sarr wrote a report that was commissioned by Macron and came with the opening of many new museums around the African continent. And this was, of course, also in the context of neo-colonial moves. France is very blatant, I would say, in this sense that there was an exchange being made, repatriation of cultural artifacts in exchange for military bases, in exchange for Algerian archives. So it's more within this kind of larger political situation that we were looking at first at. This is the moment in which that report was being delivered to President Macron, who apparently was rather staggered by the amount of materials that it proposed to be repatriated, and actually only a small amount have been given back. So on one level, repatriation is, of course, about these political maneuvers and gestures that are full of exchanges and gifts which require also reciprocations. And it's really not so much on that level that I'm anymore, I would say, interested, because it's quite obvious, and it's also quite cynical of that level of repatriation. I'm working a lot as a contemporary artist and with other contemporary artists, and one which I have admired for some time is Eduardo Abaroa, based in Mexico City, and he did a very large, I think, ongoing project about the total destruction of the National Museum of Anthropology. And you see here fictitious dismantlement, but in very great detail, of a museum I'm sure you all know. And there's many versions of this exhibition, which include these photoshopped photographs, but also rubble videos in all manner of mediums. There's a very playful, but also a very clever and very critical engagement with the problematic representation of Indigenous culture, of national history, of patrimony in all of its senses in Mexico. So looking particularly at the copy of the headdress that was made in the 1930s to be displayed, and you see on the left when that was first unveiled,